I love democracy. My Minecraft server simulates everything in history, from empires to religions to capitalist businesses. So let's take a look at how our beloved democracies are holding up. We've had tons of players get together with the noble goal for the people to run their government through votes and politics, and some nations have done an awesome job, but others crash and burn bad. This is how we created and destroyed democracy in Minecraft. If you'd like to join the world's largest history simulator in Minecraft, join today at our IP, play.stoneworks.gg. This is a nation called the Confederation of Garcios in the old world of Eldom. The COG, as it was called, was a regional member of Eldom's international geopolitics until its collapse after about 6 months. In the early history of this region, a coalition marched on a giant empire and destroyed it, carving up its territory into many small kingdoms with a shared history. A few of these kingdoms joined together as this confederation, led by the communist leader Flacreate. But the communist government quickly became inactive and ineffective, so a group led by the player Buoyo pressured them to resign in a coup. The new leaders chose to set up a direct democracy. Because they had just overthrown the nation's dictator, the Confederation's decentralized regions would benefit from their own autonomy and representation, and truthfully, Buoyo was just interested in creating and running legal institutions, so they decided to experiment with a confederational democracy. Buoyo consolidated a lot of power as the president and de facto leader for many months. He would bring others into the Confederation by appointing neighboring kingdoms' leaders as cabinet members, and so the COG became very successful as a regional power. The leaders of each province were tied to Buoyo by loyalty, and to the democratic system by their direct votes. He was a strong central pillar that built and held up the Confederation with his influence and personality. A few months into the Confederation experiment, they wrote their system down as a constitution, and it was conceptually very simple. I'm gonna tell you how the basics of it worked, and I'd like you to try and predict where things are going to spiral out of control. There's 3 institutions of power: the presidency and his cabinet, the Congress, and the governors of each province. The president was elected by the Congress every month, and he represented the Confederation's foreign policy, appointed approved ministers for everyday affairs like building, military, and economy, and would oversee the dealings of the Congress. Congress was a collection of every citizen in the COG and its constituent states, a direct democracy. They would propose and vote on motions in a specific Discord channel, which had a strict procedure outlined in the Constitution, and if the motion was passed by a simple 51% majority, the law would be added as part of the Constitution. The only exception later on was for impeaching leaders, which took a 2/3 majority. Now, every constituent state had a governor. The governors did not have voting power in the Congress, but the Constitution gave them nearly full control over their own states, so long as they gave up doing foreign policy and did not interfere with the legal proceedings of the Confederation government. They could also petition the government for resources and military aid against troublesome squatters. Now, this all sounds pretty good, pretty standard. But again, take a second to predict now. What's gonna lead this democracy into violent revolution? This was the nation of Helsia, which early on was conquered by a foreign power and then split up to lose a bunch of its land as they pulled out of it. Helsia and this peninsula joined the COG a few months later, and had a state population boom of immigrants that made it far more powerful than its neighbors. But this new group was not yet convinced of the efficacy or importance of the new Confederation system. What could the Confederation government give them that their own regional community couldn't? Helsia, first and foremost, wanted their lost land back, because they used to own the entire peninsula, but now their old land was split up into new states protected under the COG. So the Helsians were far more loyal to their own regional state than the overarching democratic government. Democracies are built on cooperation, so what happens when people decide it's better not to cooperate? To broadly simplify very complex events. First, Helsia bought one of the microstates near them in order to reclaim it. This pissed off a bunch of the other surrounding COG states because they were already worried about Helsia's expansionism, so President Buoyo made a compromise and fined Helsia $60,000. Whatever. The Constitution had nothing to say or interpret about this scandal, so a Halcyon leader, Dopapir, did most of the work setting up a Supreme Court to settle future constitutional cases. It's very notable that the Halcyons at this time were trying to build up and fix the system, but in doing so, they were creating opportunities to gain more power in the system. I'm told that the Halcyons used this Supreme Court way more than anyone else, but everyone else accepted it as legitimate, so they gained a lot of power by controlling this system that others weren't interested enough to engage with. As the Halcyons rose to prominence, Buoyo appointed more of them to his cabinet, and appointed the Halcyon leader, player Aaron X4B, as his vice president. Now, a massive outside empire called Uraka, you may have heard of it, threatened to invade the entire northeast region at this time, including the Cog. Buoyo's Confederation government wanted to peacefully submit as vassals under Uraka, whereas the Halcyons wanted to fight them. This debate got so heated that Buoyo decided to step down, and now the Halcyon leader Aaron was the president, free to use the governmental power for their own interests. And Uraka ended up not invading at all, so the Halcyons decided to go forward with building a fort in their neighbor's land to reclaim it as their own, which sparked a massive conflict. People started forging swords and armor expecting a fight, so Congress passed a law saying that states were not allowed to threaten each other with war like this. But the way people were talking about it in the Discord, it seems like they thought this would disallow interstate wars altogether. But the Halcyon leaders didn't press this issue because the ambiguity benefited them. And I don't think most people were actually reading the laws or the Constitution. So now it's realistic that a fight is on the horizon. The player Surfboard started organizing a socialist militia to resist Helsia. He has quality Stoneworks videos on his channel too, go check it out. The two states on the peninsula united against Helsia to defend themselves, and Helsia took this as aggression against them, and they declared war. Everyone else begged President Aaron to send in the military to stop this civil war, but Aaron said no, citing that interstate war was technically constitutionally allowed. Then they begged for intervention from the military minister, also a Halcyon, and he said that the Constitution didn't allow him to do that. It was finally at this point that the Congress voted to make it illegal for states to declare war against each other, and with a vote of 31— Guys, what are we doing here? Someone literally responded to this resolution with a laughing emoji. It's too late. Surfboard launched a nationwide revolution under the Socialist Provisional Government against Helsia, making it a fully national civil war. So it's blatantly clear at this point, Helsia has hijacked the constitutional government fully through legal means. And now, counterintuitively, the people resisting Helsia, the people who liked and wanted to uphold the democratic system, were the illegal insurrectionists. That's one hell of a switcheroo. The SPG and Halcyons fought a couple battles while the entire country overwhelmingly voted to dissolve the Confederation entirely. The SPG toyed with radically reforming the Constitution instead, but Surfboard and Buoyo brokered a deal with the massive empire of Uraka, and they vassalized themselves under them. And of course, this left Helsia independent, with all the territories that they wanted in the first place. In the aftermath of all this, Helsia built itself up as a strong, unitary republic. They learned from the Constitution's mistakes. Helsia also didn't have much internal sectionalism, so they could work well with a unitary government, an expanded judicial system, and a small, representative legislature. While Helsia got to live out the rest of its days as a stable and influential community in Eldom, the regions of the Cog really lost a lot of political relevance. Its land would change hands between different empires or give rise to some small backwater nations. And by the end of it, the Halcyon Republic had even annexed the Cog's capital city of Garcedo. So, besides the stated facts of the story, how did this all happen? And why is democracy in Minecraft clearly very hard to do right? The slow degradation and collapse of this system is extremely messy, so let's analyze. First, Buoyo himself was a central pillar of the democracy. As the founder, he was president for 4 out of the 6 first monthly electoral terms. He held all the de facto power behind the scenes, and I think the democracy was a bit of his own pet project on this server. If he had vanished in the middle of all this, the system becomes very weak and crumbles. Also, Buoyo's cabinet appointments were based on loyalty of key regional leaders, not necessarily a meritocracy. This helped to create a great expansion of the Confederation in its region, but it didn't make it sustainable because people didn't trust that the government was being run competently or fairly. After a few months, the old cabinet members wouldn't even play on the server in-game, but they were still running things on the Discord for some reason. That caused a lot of anger until it was fixed, and that was when the Halcyons became cabinet leaders. Next, decisions were made by a simple, often unengaged majority in a direct democracy. This is messy and highly incentivizes political maneuvering. The governors of each region could simply ping their people and go, "Hey, vote yes on this proposal," and the citizens will often do it and heavily skew the vote because they don't care. And for a region with a high population like Helcia, this gives them a lot of power. Within this, Helcia was able to gain more power by thoroughly learning the system and using it to create new authoritative positions and suck up more power for themselves. Next, the legal system was fully and rigidly based on the Constitution alone. Aside from making the Constitution a bit disorganized and difficult to use, this one has dire consequences because it devalued the Constitution, and the Constitution itself absorbed issues that caused problems, like it being technically legal for states to attack each other, and unconsensually reorganizing state territories being disallowed. Both of those would have slowed down Helcia's expansion. I think you need to have some aspect of a vagueness or catch-all article that allows for reforms and disallows tearing your country apart. Yes, the practicalities of that are abusable, but the practicalities of not having it are abusable as well. Also, nothing prevented Helcia from controlling all the most powerful positions of the government, most notably the president, minister of war, and the de facto leader of the Supreme Court. If the Helcions could secure all of those seats and still maintain a powerful presence in the Congress and as a governor of their own state, then they have the legal power to strike down basically any political resistance against them. That's a huge part of how all this went down. And if the Constitution mandated that these positions be filled separately from people from different states, it may have gone differently. Next, Helcia's usurpation of power always had plausible deniability. Because everything that Helcia did to hijack the government was legal, they could always justify that they were doing the right thing for the Constitution. Helcia could rely on the fact that anything they did, everyone would start arguing about it, and these arguments would distract from the abusive trajectory that it was truly on. I think in this story, the only one who really took a step out of the system and saw what was coming was Surfport, the leader of the socialist resistance group. Next, the nearly full autonomy of constituent states gave everyone very little to unify over. Every cooperative system needs an underlying unifying force or vision that ties them all together. Whether it be a national religion, an historical mythology of throwing off a tyrannical empire, joining to celebrate national holidays, a doctrine of imperialism, or even just one single market that everyone goes to in the capital, where they all see each other and they talk and they hang out. The COG's culture and political structure did not try to develop these systems of national unity. The best thing they had to unite them in the later days was a single festival that Buoyo hosted called Cogsmas, which I think delayed the collapse of the system, but it was not nearly enough. And lastly, a lack of accountability for breaking down democratic institutions. This is the single most important one in my opinion, so let me really dive into it for a second. How can you hold anti-democratic people accountable on this Minecraft server? There's several problems with this. Like we said before, it's very easy for a person to do anti-democratic things within the confines of the law and justify that it's not anti-democratic. And those arguments about whether or not something is anti-democratic will bog down any reactive prosecution that punishes people for screwing with the system. Secondly, this is Minecraft. In real life, if someone commits an insurrection or tampers with votes, the government can find them, throw them in jail, or kill them if they've been a really bad boy. On this specific Minecraft server, if someone in your group does some anti-democratic, tyrannical stuff, you can bar them from holding power, try and ruin their reputation, have them kicked out of the town or the government, or start a dreadful war with them. Those options are all either immaterial, really limited, or extremely escalated. If a Minecraft democracy could find a more medium-sized way to punish their constituents for degrading the democracy, it would be far more stable and easy to hold individuals accountable. So what did Helcia actually do to collapse the COG? Truthfully, no single action they did was anti-democratic on its own terms. They were helping to fix the system for months and didn't get rid of any institutions. But They encroached on the sovereignty of neighboring states, and they packed the government with their own people to control the real positions of power. It got to the point where the other states could not meaningfully resist their expansionism through politics, so instead, they had to turn to war and collapse. If you're trying to build a stable and robust democracy, you need to take all these things into account. You need to have a constitution that separates powers and makes consolidation difficult, build a community that loves democracy and culturally guards against any single group or dictator, and have a strong structure of language so you can meaningfully detect and avoid abuses of power. The Constitution did some of this very well, but others, not so much. We'll talk over some advice in a bit. So yes, I do have some criticisms of these democracies of the past, but only because I really do love democracy. We've had many great, stable examples of democracies on Stoneworks that deserve recognition. Helsia itself formed a small, strong republic based on its legal system and tight community. The Republic of Sethris had a long but kinda turbulent run as a democracy that saw a coup and many constitutional reforms over time. The nation of Montroig in Rathnir had a republic that was, well, kinda dictatorial. The USSE had a successful democracy in part because its branding self-selected for ideological leftists with devotion to the socialist experiment. In our current world of Abexilis, the nation of Tiahil has so far built a fascinating republic out of its Megalopolis project, which has its elected leaders need to buy in with monthly donations to the state. But for Minecraft democracies, there is one that recently bursted onto the scene and changed everything. This is the island of Adramis, and like many lands in our current world of Abexilis, it was fractured among several small nations. In the north was the Gurtek Horde, led by Khan Blake V10. As the current Adramians tell the story, Blake was an extremely flippant and abusive leader, who would always pawn responsibility off on his subordinates, but opportunistically seek greater and greater positions of power for himself. So Blake was surrounded by competent and powerful players like Subterra and General Ich, but they were tired of the Khan's mismanagement and ego. Subterra and Blake met up in real life, and Subterra convinced him to step down as the Khan. But Blake returned later and tried to take it back in a power struggle. In this conflict, Blake lashed out at them and pulled a "if I can't rule the Gurtek Horde, no one can," and he deleted the nation's Discord server, which is the community's foundation and social space. So Subterra and the others remade the Discord and reformed into the nation of Maravilla. And the worst part, I'm told, is that when Subterra and Blake met up in real life, Subterra brought some nice Hennessy, and Blake brought Bud Light Lime. So we should have known things were about to go south. But now Subterra was in charge, with active popular support and good relationships with many on the continent. To the south was the monarchical nation of Quinthos. As I'm told, the king here basically set this nation up for failure, because he told his subjects that they could leave whenever they wanted, and he didn't want to deal with hostile squatters settling in his territory. Lo and behold, the player Drafanaris and his nation of Zamotes decided to settle there, and they slowly expanded into Quinthos' land with a better grip on power. The Quinthosi king and the player Elkul of Zamotes signed a treaty to settle the border, but they quickly got into a disagreement where tensions almost rose to war. But public outcry against the Quinthosi king made him rage quit, so he abdicated and gave the land over to Elkul, who folded the state into Zamotes' pre-existing, homegrown democracy. While all this Quinthos Zamote stuff was going down, that old Khan of the Gurtek, Blake, accidentally leaked that he intended to use the Gurtek Horde to conquer the entire island through violent force. So a player from the nearby neutral isolationist state of Velarim, named Ferret with a Hat, went around to the southern nations and started building a coalition to resist Gurtek's expansion, until his neutral nation leaders told him to shut up, stop causing trouble. So what do we have here with all these disparate happenings? We have the failure of two authoritarian regimes, the rise of well-connected people with popular support through Subterra and the Zamotes Republic, and the latent Cold War when everyone thought Gurtek was going to attack. In this fertile ground, the player Elkul of Zamotes had an idea. He met with each leader of the continent to stop this foolishness and unite into a superpower under one democratic banner. The proposal was clear and solid. Apply Zamotz's republican system that had worked on a smaller scale for a few years now to bind each state on the continent together into a federation, as well as some extra conditions that favored Zamotz's status quo. But this raised red flags with the others, who were still a bit wary of the idea of unifying. So, they started a constitutional convention. The players stayed up all night for 3 nights, even with some players having their first day of real-life classes the next day, and others having to run up 18 flights of stairs to make it to the computer on time. Over 30 players on the continent hammered out a compromise constitution based on Zamotz's republic. One Zamotzian threatened to boycott the nation from the republic and tear down all their progress, unless Zamotz got to control the nation's Discord. So again, they compromised. That Zamotz would get to control the mechanics of the in-game nation, Maravilla would get to control the Discord, and Valorim would be the capital and central cultural hub. With the Constitution signed, the borders drawn, and the first elected president being Ferret with a hat, a new superpower was born on the world of Abexilus, the United States of Adramis, the first nation to have overthrown tyranny and raised the flag of a diverse united republic on this world. USA, 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 USA. Now, I could take some time to nitpick their constitutional system, or talk about how the United States of Adramis is currently at war with a microstate to the north called the CSA. Funny how stuff like that works out. But I think it's finally time to give some positive advice to the democratic nations on here. The first piece of advice for democracies is one that most already do. Adopt the practices that democracies use in real life. Stuff like writing down your constitution, splitting the government into independent branches, a bicameral legislature, independent courts, the rule of law, term limits, and balancing the representations of small and big constituent groups. All that stuff comes pretty intuitively to people making a democracy. But a lot of this other advice will take creative energy, or may seem a bit counterintuitive, all for the sake of creating a stable, democratic system for your Minecraft nation. I've argued with a lot of people who disagree with me on some of these points, so think critically about whether or not these would be fitting for your republic. I recommend having an undemocratic institution that helps long-term stability, specifically a sort of council of former leader elders that works as advisors and guarantors of the nation's democratic institutions. This has 3 benefits. It helps promote long-term stability, because democracies tend to think in the short term, whereas elders can guide policy to last longer. It also allows longtime leaders to maintain a high status in the community without having to do the exhausting work of politics, all while getting them out of the way and making room for new talent. And it gives you a pool of experienced people to draw back into politics if they're urgently needed. I recommend having a system that somehow rewards candidates who come in second place in an election, and ceremonially assures the loyalties of the losing candidate's supporters, maybe by having official history keepers memorialize their campaigns and positive policy goals, or by giving them a fitting position in the leader's cabinet. Elections often cause a lot of toxicity between the 2 electorates in the nation, and this can make running the nation harder for the winner. If you can systematically ease these hurt feelings by rewarding the losing candidate and getting their supporters to participate in a civic ritual where they pledge their allegiance to the new administration, that'll go a long way to keeping things productive and non-toxic. I recommend making a point to spread democracy. Democracy easily justifies itself based on the values of equality and consent of the governed. If your nation becomes imperialist about spreading democracies, it politically reinforces how morally superior your nation is over your authoritarian neighbors. This strengthens citizens' opinions and attachment to the system, and disincentivizes players from screwing with democracy, because we don't want to end up like those idiot authoritarians over there. There's also a theory in liberal international relations that says that democracies are less likely to go to war with each other because populations tend to have more common interests and values with each other than powerful leaders do. So, if you believe that, then spreading democracy will also get you more allies in the future. I recommend making the concept of democracy itself sacred, almost like it being a religion. Think about how seriously Americans treat rituals with the flag, or reciting the Pledge of Allegiance every day, or even paintings that show George Washington as some sort of god. Elevating your democracy to a quasi-divine, ritualized status will help personally ingrain its values and importance into the population, and it will solidify that this land and community here are inherently democratic. the divinity of the republic, so to say. Enshrine your constitution as a sacred, holy artifact. Have monuments to your founders. Tell your origin story as an embellished legend. Democracy then becomes an end unto itself, as decreed by God. Now this might make people a bit overzealous, but hey, they'll be overzealous for your system. I recommend actively working to establish a unifying factor for your population, either in their cultural identity or economic habits. Most democracies on this Minecraft server want to be totally hands-off about their constituent provinces, which is fair. It's probably the best part of a system that guarantees their individual rights. But a federal system becomes much weaker if people don't have a personal connection to their neighbors besides the fact that they share a government. Theoretically, it may be best to, first, host some national festivals, holidays that everyone can attend and just have fun together. Then, maybe institute a program of national monument building in all the towns around the diverse country, getting them to creatively interpret and build physical manifestations of the democracy and the national culture's symbols will help unify everybody under them. And then, with the consent of the populace, maybe everyone can decide on some roleplay language or slogan or religion to adopt together. And that way you can build a more cohesive nationality that has an identity tied to democratic values. I find that true long-term success in Minecraft geopolitics is based on who can build the strongest national identity. So you need to get people on board with some aspect of underlying culture and have democratic values be a cornerstone of that. Lastly, and this one is a bit more aspirational than the others, I recommend you list out in your constitution the most basic processes and institutions that your democratic system relies upon. That way, if anyone tries to reform or screw with the democratic system, you'll be able to talk about it with a common language and structural understanding of the system, helping to bypass the bullshit arguments that happen whenever someone does something anti-democratic. It would list some stuff like this. 1. Standards for citizenship. Maybe you have to live primarily in this nation, not be a criminal, and not be brought in by a politician to secure votes. 2. Civic engagement. You can only run for election if you know how the system works and are actively participating in it. And then the rest of these very, very important pillars of a functioning democracy, like the peaceful transfer of power. God bless all these institutions. Now, like I said, simply fleshing out the particulars of these institutions isn't going to protect their integrity for you. But take the standards for citizenship, for example. If someone does like my friend Clap did, and give a bunch of their friends dual citizenship so they can waltz in and rig every single Senate vote, you can pull up this convenient list and go, hey, this guy's trying to screw with our standards of citizenship, let's hold him accountable. Or if they rile up their cult of followers to attack the government and try to overturn an election, you can point to the list and say, see, they violated the transfer of power! They tried to take power for themselves!